He made the most feared her across the universe. Laugh. The glassy towers of Nova Helion shimmered under the glow of twin moons, their surfaces scattering the last rays of the sunset into a kaleidoscope of color. In the diplomatic skimmer, Julian Mercer tugged at the stiff collar of his formal jacket, feeling the pressure of centuries of protocol pressing down on his shoulders. Eliza Tran, his assistant, and the only person in the galaxy who dared to scold him, shot him a warning look over the rim of her holotablet. "You're going to crease that, Julian," she chided, her voice low but edged with concern as her fingers danced across a list of Felinari's customs. He tried to muster a reassuring smile, but it came out brittle, wavering at the edges. "Sorry, I'm about to meet the alien sovereign who might wipe us out. It's a lot." Eliza's eyes, softened by empathy, flicked away from the floating screens. "All the other envoys failed because they acted like politicians. You're here because you're real. Just be yourself." He nodded, wishing he found that advice as easy as she made it sound. The skimmer glided lower, its hull humming, as the city's heart came into view. The citadel rose from the center, a central spire alive with internal light, casting luminous veins through its crystalline walls. At the base, a cordon of Felinaris guards waited, their uniforms dark and severe, their feline eyes reflecting the dusk. As the skimmer settled with a hiss, the doors slid open. Commander Rin Sable stood before them, her presence cold and unyielding. Her black uniform cut a stark figure against the glowing backdrop, and the insignia on her collar gleamed like a warning. "The Sovereign is waiting. Follow closely. Any deviation will be met with force," she said, her voice clipped and mechanical. Julian nodded, careful not to flinch under her gaze. Eliza's hand brushed his sleeve, a silent grounding gesture. Together they moved into the citadel, flanked by silent guards whose tails swayed in perfect unison. The corridors breathed with life. Translucent stone walls pulsed with inner light, each surface reflecting 1,000 feline eyes, curious and judging. Their footsteps echoed as they traversed winding halls, past alcoves carved from mother of pearl, and beneath arches etched with star maps and ancient Felinari script. The air shimmered with a faint floral scent, alien, intoxicating. Finally, they halted before immense doors of obsidian glass. Rin raised a gloved hand, and the doors parted without a sound, revealing the throne chamber within. Sovereign Nira Ashen reclined on a dais of woven crystal, the seat rising like a frozen wave above the chamber. Her hair was a midnight cascade with streaks of deep crimson, feline ears standing alert atop her head, and a long, luxurious tail curled languidly around the throne's arm. Her gown, spun from translucent fiber, shimmered with every motion, echoing the city's own radiance. Her amber eyes, slit-pupilled and ancient, measured Julian with a predator's patience. Beside her stood advisor Tarek Loon, his frame tall and wiry, gripping a staff whose crystalline tip hummed with pale electric energy. His silver hair was gathered in intricate braids, and his eyes flickered from Julian to Eliza and back, wary and calculating. Julian drew a steadying breath and bowed deeply, his forehead nearly touching the cool crystal floor, a gesture he had practiced but never truly mastered. Naira's voice, low and commanding with a velvet undertone, filled the hall. "Rise, Julian Mercer of Terra. Convince me your world deserves to endure." Julian's heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat threatening to drown out his thoughts. He straightened, meeting the sovereign's gaze. The silence pressed in, thick and expectant. In that moment, something reckless flared within him. He grinned, genuine and unguarded. "Your Excellency, maybe what your empire truly needs isn't another planet, but a little joy." The chamber froze. Rin's hand hovered near her sidearm, golden eyes narrowed. Tarek's eyebrows arched in disbelief, his staff pulsing as if drawing power for an imminent strike. Eliza, standing just behind Julian, bit her lip and muttered a silent prayer. And then, like a crack in ancient ice, a sound split the silence. Sovereign Naira laughed, a rich, melodic laugh, layered with surprise and delight. The crystalline dais pulsed in resonance, sending ripples of colored light up the walls. Even the guards outside the chamber stiffened, their ears swiveling in confusion. Recovering, Naira placed a clawed hand to her lips, her tail flicking with amusement. "Clear the hall. Leave only the Terran." Tarek objected, his voice tight with protocol. "Your Excellency, I must—" "Go," she commanded, eyes never leaving Julian. Tarek hesitated, but obedience won out. The doors closed with a soft sigh, sealing Julian and Naira alone within the chamber. She rose, descending the dais with predatory grace, each step deliberate. Up close, Julian could see the play of muscle beneath her skin, the sharpness of her claws, the intelligence burning in her eyes. She circled him, studying him as though weighing his soul. "You're either fearless or foolish," she said, her tone unreadable. Julian held her gaze. "Your laughter is worth the risk." One of Naira's ears twitched in surprise, a flicker of something unguarded crossing her features. "My kind bred that response out generations ago." Julian stepped closer, emboldened by the fragile electric tension between them. "Some things can't be engineered away?" She circled him, her tail brushing his leg, a feather-light touch that sent a thrill through him. Her claws unsheathed, glinting in the light, yet her lips quirked in amusement. "I should have you punished for such insolence." "But you won't," Julian replied, his voice steady, "because you're intrigued." Naira's golden eyes narrowed, but a spark of curiosity lingered there. Her claws retracted, and she turned away, but not before he caught the hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "You will join me privately tomorrow. We will discuss Terra's fate at length." "As you wish, Sovereign," Julian said, bowing, his eyes lingering on her as she ascended back to the throne. "Though I warn you, I might make you laugh again." She turned, her silhouette haloed by the city's twin moons, her tail curling with secret amusement. "We shall see, Julian Mercer." As the doors opened again, Rin Sable entered, her face thunderous with suspicion. She escorted Julian out with brisk efficiency, Tarek muttering about decorum and the dangers of Terran unpredictability. Eliza fell in beside Julian, her expression a storm of relief and exasperation. "I can't decide if you're a genius or a lunatic," she hissed, eyes wide. "Why not both?" Julian replied, grinning, adrenaline still thrumming through his veins. Making the most feared sovereign laugh wasn't in the manual, neither was flirting with her. Eliza whispered, "Are you trying to start a galactic war?" "Maybe I'm trying to stop one," Julian said, still smiling as the Citadel doors closed behind them, leaving the future trembling on the edge of possibility. Julian waited in a chamber of refracted crystal, the light painting his face in shifting hues. Violet, indigo, amber, each one passing over his features like the ghost of a thought. The silence was alive with faint vibrations, the distant pulse of Nova Helion's heart. Around him, the walls shimmered, facets catching and scattering the twin moon's rays until it felt as if he floated inside a living prism. The door slid open with a whisper, and Sovereign Nira entered. She was less formal now, her ceremonial regalia replaced by a sleek, dark garment that hugged her athletic frame. The deep crimson streaks in her hair caught the light, painting scarlet shadows along her cheeks. Yet, despite the absence of a crown or scepter, she radiated authority with every stride. Her feline ears flicked back, then forward again as she studied him. "You're early," she noted, voice unhurried, but layered with subtle amusement. Julian straightened from his seat, offering a lopsided smile. Eager to continue our cultural exchange, he replied, eyes tracking the way her tail curled and flicked, betraying her mood even as her expression remained poised. Naira's lips quirked at the edge and she crossed the room with an easy, predatory grace, settling onto a crystalline seat opposite him. She regarded him for a moment, her amber gaze sharp and searching, before speaking. You Terrans never do what's expected. I suppose that's why you're still standing. He shrugged. We're persistent. Maybe a little reckless, but that's helped us survive. She arched a brow, one ear angling curiously. Persistence and recklessness are not always virtues, Julian Mercer. He grinned. But sometimes they're exactly what's needed. A soft hum filled the chamber as Nira activated a holo display between them, conjuring a projection of the spiral arm of the galaxy. Stars shimmered in miniature, entire empires reduced to points of light. My people have watched yours for centuries. We study, measure, weigh. But we have never truly understood what drives you. Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Curiosity, stubbornness, hope, maybe. We're always looking for meaning, even when there isn't any. Sometimes we invent it just to have something to chase. She regarded him in silence for a moment, then flicked her tail in agreement. Your people adapt quickly. You've survived so much. Environmental collapse, internal wars, threats from beyond your own system. Julian's expression sobered. We're stubborn and curious. Sometimes that's all that's kept us going. He hesitated, then, emboldened by the sense of intimacy in the crystalline chamber, asked, Can I ask something personal? Nira's tail paused in its restless motion, her eyes sharpening. She weighed him, then nodded, her voice softening. You may. He drew a slow breath. Yesterday, was that truly your first laugh? A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Naira's tail stilled entirely, curling protectively around one leg. She looked away, and in that moment, Julian saw a fissure in her composure. It was, she admitted quietly, my family line was altered to suppress such responses. Laughter, mirth, impulsive emotion, seen as weaknesses in rulers, my ancestors sought to breed them out. Julian, moved by the confession, knelt beside her, crystal cool beneath his knees. He hesitated, then reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before gently brushing her fingers. Does that trouble you? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Nira stiffened. I do not fear, she replied, but he felt the faint tremor in her hand, the subtle tension in her posture. He met her gaze steadily, his own hand warm against hers. Then why is your pulse racing? A low hiss escaped her lips, half warning, half involuntary, a sound that thrummed with both danger and vulnerability. Her claws extended, pressing lightly to his chest, not enough to break the skin, but enough to remind him of the power she held. You overstep, she said, her eyes narrowed, voice edged with warning. Or I'm the first to try, Julian replied softly, refusing to shrink away. The air between them was electric, the moment stretched taut and fragile. Naira's breath caught, her claws flexed, and for an instant it seemed as though something irrevocable might happen. Suddenly, the chamber was shattered by a blaring alarm. The crystal walls flashed red, and Rin's voice, sharp and urgent, echoed through the intercom. Sovereign, attackers in the diplomatic wing, they're heading for the Terran's quarters. Naira shot to her feet. All softness vanished, replaced by lethal purpose. She seized Julian's arm and hauled him upright, her grip firm but not painful. They think you're there. Tarek's doing, surely. We must move. She crossed to a section of the wall and pressed her palm to a near-invisible panel. A seam appeared, sliding open to reveal a hidden passage, cool and narrow, pulsing with faint blue light. "This way leads to my private rooms. You'll be safer here," she commanded, already leading him inside. Julian hesitated on the threshold, searching her face. "And if I refuse to hide?" Naira stopped, turning back to him. Her amber eyes, stripped of pretense, revealed a flicker of something raw and unguarded. "They'll kill you," she said, voice low. He smiled, reckless and sincere. "They can try. Let me help." She searched his face, weighing his resolve against the dangers of her world. Then, to Julian's astonishment, her mouth curved in a genuine, if fleeting, smile. "Very well." She unclipped a small device from her belt, a compact shield emitter, no larger than a Terran apple, and pressed it into his hand. "Try not to get killed. I'd rather not lose you yet." He turned the device over, fingers brushing the sleek surface. "High praise, Sovereign." Her gaze softened. "Naira," she said quietly, almost shy beneath her command. "When we're alone, call me Naira." A crash sounded somewhere behind them, a heavy door giving way, metal shrieking as it tore from its housing. Naira's ears flattened, her canines bared in a snarl. She pushed Julian deeper into the passage, her tail lashing with fury. "Shall we show them what happens to those who threaten what's mine?" she growled, the possessiveness in her tone sending a jolt through Julian. His heart skipped, but his courage only grew. As he activated the shield, feeling its energy ripple around him, he nodded. "Lead on, Naira." They moved into the darkness together, shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever storm waited beyond. The citadel was chaos after the attack. The great crystalline halls, so recently a fortress of calm, were now alive with alarms, security drones swarming like hornets, and the sharp scent of ozone in the air. Julian sat on a bench in a side corridor, nursing a shallow scrape on his forearm, the faint sting a reminder of how close everything had come to disaster. Eliza paced in front of him, her boots tapping out a nervous rhythm on the polished floor. "You fought beside the Sovereign, and flirted." "Again," she accused, arms folded, her voice pitched low to avoid the ears of passing Felinaris guards. Julian tried for an innocent smile, then winced as he flexed his arm. "The flirting was accidental," he protested, not quite meeting her gaze. He couldn't keep his eyes from straying to Naira. Across the hall, the Sovereign moved with a predator's certainty, her dark hair bristling with a visible charge. She stood nose to nose with Commander Rin, her questions sharp as claws, every word carrying the weight of command. Eliza shot him a look that could have cut glass. "Tarek's supporters want you executed. They're calling for a trial, claiming the Sovereign's judgment is compromised by Terran influence." Julian sighed, scrubbing a hand through his hair. "They're not wrong, but not in the way they think." He dropped his voice, nodding toward Naira. "There's something off about their society. The emotional suppression. I saw it in the fight. Naira showed more than anger. She was worried. She was afraid. She cared. These feelings aren't coming from nowhere." Eliza paused, her brow furrowing as she considered. "You think the modifications are breaking down?" "I think they were never meant to be permanent." Julian gestured at the floating display hovering above a nearby pedestal, lines of Felinaris script scrolling across holographic panes. He flicked his fingers, pulling up centuries of archived records, his eyes searching for patterns. "See these gaps?" He pointed, highlighting sections of historical logs where whole decades were missing, replaced by opaque system errors. Nira approached, her presence a storm front sweeping in. She dismissed Eliza with a brief, authoritative nod. "Leave us," she ordered, her gaze never leaving Julian. Eliza hesitated, then slipped away, shooting Julian a final warning look. Naira stood beside him at the records, her tail flicking with agitation. These files are for the ruling bloodline only. Even Tarek cannot access all of them, she said, her voice clipped, defensive. Julian looked up at her, his tone gentle but insistent. So why are there missing pieces? These aren't just redactions. Someone's erased entire events, years at a time. Naira's tail snapped once, then settled in a slow, wary sway. The modifications are our pride. They allowed us to build an empire without chaos. Her gaze slid away from the records, out toward the tumultuous halls beyond. No unpredictable uprisings, no violent passions. Order. Without love? Julian pressed, moving closer, searching her face for cracks in the mask. Is that really progress? He let the silence hang, then quietly. You're changing, Naira. These new feelings, they scare you. But they excite you too. She started to object, but Julian caught her hand, folding it between his own and placing it over his heart. She stiffened, eyes wide, ears flicking back in surprise. Stop hiding, Julian whispered. Feel this. Tell me what it does to you. Naira's hand trembled slightly, her pupils narrowing to golden slits. Her tail slid around his wrist, binding him in place, a gesture both possessive and seeking. I sense things I cannot explain. Her voice was unsteady, stripped of its usual command. They're called feelings, Julian said, his thumb stroking the back of her hand, brushing the soft fur. They're not weakness. They're the reason we fight for anything at all. She leaned into his touch, her eyes half-lidded as if drinking in the sensation. The tension between them was a living thing, humming in the charged air. What are you doing to me? She asked, her words thick with wonder and fear. Nothing you weren't always capable of, Julian murmured, pressing his forehead gently to hers. I'm just reminding you. Naira's claws pricked the fabric of his jacket, not quite breaking skin, but making it clear how thin the line was between vulnerability and danger. No counsel, no rules, she growled, her voice dropping to a husky timbre. He barely had time to answer before her lips claimed his in a kiss, fierce and bright, as if something wild had finally broken free inside her. Her hair shimmered with the energy of the citadel, crimson streaks ablaze in the fractured light. Julian melted into her, holding her close, feeling the thrum of her heart through their joined hands. As they parted, breathless, the floating display above them flickered to life with a new urgency. A hidden file, locked behind generations of security protocols, suddenly activated, lines of archaic Felinaris script unfurling across the holographic panes. Both of them turned, still close, reading the words as they appeared. Project Nightfall. Emotional suppression via targeted gene edits, intended as a temporary crisis measure. Warning, not to exceed a single generation. Protocols for reversal. Encrypted. Naira's face went rigid, her body frozen with shock. This is dated 7 generations ago. Her voice was barely audible, disbelieving. Julian read over her shoulder, his arm still protectively around her waist. Someone's been lying to your people for a long time, he said softly, anger simmering beneath the words. And I think we know who. Naira's claws flexed, her tail lashing with fury and confusion. Together, they stared at the damning file, the truth shimmering in front of them, undeniable. The Citadel's chaos faded for a moment as the weight of revelation settled between them, their alliance forged in fire and secret longing, with the fate of an empire balanced on the edge of feeling. The royal archives sprawled beneath the citadel, a labyrinth of glass and memory, untouched by sunlight and heavy with secrets. Nira's stride was swift and furious, her claws scraping against the crystal floor with every step. The echo of her anger reverberated through the endless corridors, each lined with shelves of pulsing data crystals, testimonies of her people's long and carefully curated history. Julian hurried to keep pace beside her, the air crackling with the tension radiating off Naira. Her hair shimmered with static, the crimson streaks almost aflame in the pale blue glow. 7 generations of deceit, she spat, her voice tight and raw. They made us believe we were broken without even knowing what was stolen. Her claws traced gouges in the wall as she passed, a physical mark of her fury. At every turn, the archives responded to her presence, holographic records blooming in their path, transparent panes flickering to life, scenes of coronations, wars, sterile assemblies, and always, a strange absence of warmth behind the eyes of each sovereign. Julian watched, horror mounting, as the truth emerged. Project Nightfall was never designed to last. Each record confirmed it. Gene edits intended only as a temporary balm during an ancient crisis. But with each new ruler, the edits had been reapplied, a cycle of engineered numbness perpetuated by a hidden hand. Tarek's faction, Julian realized aloud, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through files. They've been controlling the bloodline, keeping your people from ever feeling, ever truly living. Naira's tail lashed in agitation, her jaw set. We trusted them to protect us from chaos, not erase our souls. But why? Julian pressed, searching her face for the answer, even as the crystalline shelves shimmered with data that offered none. Before she could respond, a shrill alarm split the air, its sound crystalline and cold. The archives flickered as red warning glyphs pulsed across every surface. Naira spun to the nearest console, her fingers flying over the controls. A schematic of the palace appeared, lines of security protocols cascading beside it. Tarek knows we're here, she hissed, her eyes wide and glinting with fear and fury. He's activated the palace defenses. The temperature plunged, mist curling along the floor as security systems came alive. Razor-thin spikes of glass slid down from the ceiling and rose from the floor, creating shifting barriers that forced them deeper into the maze. Julian felt the first sting of cold in his lungs. We have to move. Now. Naira led the way, her knowledge of the archive's secrets guiding them through passages that shimmered and reformed behind them. At every juncture, she paused just long enough to reroute the security, her claws sparking against hidden panels. Still, the defenses pressed in, shepherding them through ever-narrowing halls. It's a setup, Naira warned as they rounded a final corner, the glass underfoot slick and humming. He's funneling us to the throne room. He wants witnesses. Julian's pulse raced as the walls closed in, the temperature dropping further. Good. Your people deserve the truth, he said, voice strong despite the chill. They burst through the last crystalline barrier into the throne room, breathless and defiant. The council was already assembled, their robes glinting in the light of 100 data crystals. Tarek stood before the dais, his staff raised high, silver eyes burning with triumphant calculation. The Terran has corrupted our sovereign, he declared, voice echoing through the chamber. His supporters murmured agreement, eyes flashing with suspicion and fear. Naira stalked forward, every line of her body alive with righteous fury. Her hair and tail bristled, sparks leaping from her fingertips. The only corruption is yours, Tarek, she answered, her voice ringing with emotion. 7 generations of control, 7 generations of stolen hearts and deadened minds. She speaks with emotion, Tarek sneered, pointing an accusatory claw at her. The Terran's influence is poison. He's undermined our strength, infected you with chaos. Julian stepped into the light beside Naira, his chin lifted. Or she's finally free, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Tell them about Project Nightfall, Tarek. Tell them how you and your predecessors kept your own people shackled. Tarek scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Ancient history. Crisis management, nothing more. The edits kept us from repeating the mistakes of the past. Naira shook her head, stepping up onto the dais so all could see the fire in her eyes. Lies. The gene edits were meant to last months, not centuries. The records are clear. You've all seen them now. Every generation, Tarek's faction intervened, without council approval, without consent. The room fell into a stunned silence. The guards glanced uneasily at one another, hands resting on the hilts of their sidearms. Commander Rin stepped forward, her stance proud. "I serve the Sovereign, not you," she declared, eyes fixed on Tarek. Julian reached for Naira's hand as she turned to address the council. "We were never meant to be numb," she said, voice trembling with conviction. "Our strength comes from being whole, from feeling joy, grief, love, and rage. You robbed us of our truth to keep us docile. That ends today." Tarek's face twisted in desperation. He drew a concealed weapon, the barrel gleaming with deadly promise. "You've doomed us all with your weakness," he screamed, aiming at Nira. Julian moved on instinct, stepping in front of Nira and activating the compact shield device she had given him. The weapon's energy bolt struck the barrier, sending a ripple of blue light around them. Guards surged forward, tackling Tarek to the ground and wrenching the weapon from his grasp. The council erupted in shouts and confusion. Nira, shaken but resolute, pulled Julian into a fierce embrace. "You risked everything," she breathed, her voice thick with gratitude and something deeper. "I'm getting used to it," Julian replied, brushing a stray lock of her hair behind her ear, his thumb grazing the soft edge of her feline ear. Her breath caught, and she smiled, truly smiled, before the entire assembly. Without hesitation, Naira drew him closer, her lips finding his in a kiss that was both a promise and a declaration. The council stared, stunned, as her tail curled possessively around Julian's waist. She broke the kiss, her forehead resting against his, her voice soft and private. "You've changed everything," she whispered, the weight of generations trembling in her words. Julian's hand lingered at her cheek. "Worth it, to see you smile." Around them, the council began to murmur, not in dissent, but in awe. In that moment, amidst the shattered illusions and the dawning of something new, Naira and Julian stood together, the future of an empire forged by the truth of feeling. Days of upheaval followed. The empire reeled as the truth of Project Nightfall rippled outward from the citadel, unstoppable as a solar flare. On some worlds, Felinaris citizens poured into the streets, their voices raised in raw, unfamiliar protest. Riots broke out under the twin moons of Nova Helion, the air thick with both hope and anger. Elsewhere, entire councils clung to the old ways, their arguments taut with fear. For the first time in living memory, feelings, not logic, ruled the heart of the empire. In her private chamber high above the chaos, Naira stood at the window, gaze fixed on the swelling crowds below. The plaza teemed with Felinaris of all ages, their faces upturned, eyes wide with uncertainty and longing. The city's glass spires trembled with the weight of so many voices. "They're afraid," Naira murmured, her breath fogging the crystal. "So am I. After centuries of logic, emotion feels overwhelming." She pressed a hand to the glass, claws gently tapping as if searching for order in the riot of feeling. Her tail drooped, listless with doubt. Julian appeared behind her, his presence grounding and warm. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. She relaxed into him with a shuddering sigh, her tail winding slowly around his leg. "You're not drowning," he whispered, lips brushing the shell of her ear. "You're learning to breathe." She turned in his embrace, nuzzling into the curve of his neck, her breath a soft caress against his skin. For a moment the world outside faded, leaving only the sanctuary they created together. The renewal ceremony is soon, she said, her voice low, weighted with uncertainty. Without the edits, changes will begin. Not just in me, but everywhere. But I worry for my people. What if the fear is too much? Julian brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear, tracing the streak of crimson with his thumb. Fear is part of being alive. You face it, and you come through stronger. Let them see that you're not untouched by this. Lead them into the unknown, Nira. That's what real rulers do. Naira managed a trembling smile, but before she could answer, a deep boom shook the walls. The entire citadel trembled, dust drifting from the crystal arch above. An alarm shrieked, harsh and urgent. The door slammed open and Commander Rin burst in, her uniform torn, fur streaked with soot. Sovereign! Tarek's loyalists have stormed the medical archives. They have hostages, including Counselor Zira's son. They're threatening to destroy the renewal serum unless you concede to their demands. Naira's hair bristled, her tail lashing with fury. They want to force us to keep the edits, to make this prison permanent. Julian's mind raced, already assembling a plan. He turned to Eliza, who was breathless from running up the stairs. Show me the maintenance schematics. Eliza pulled up a holomap, her hands shaking. There are service ducts, ventilation shafts. Too narrow for Felinaris, but... Julian grinned, winking at Naira. Just right for a Terran. I'll get to the hostages from behind. Rin, have your guards ready for a distraction. Eliza's eyes widened, her voice sharp with protest. Julian, you can't. It's insane. He shrugged, the corner of his mouth quirking up. I'm what Terra needs me to be. His gaze found Nira's, holding it. Besides, I'm getting good at this hero thing. Naira caught his arm, claws pricking through the fabric of his jacket. If you're caught... Julian pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling. Then distract them, he whispered. Naira kissed him, fierce and urgent, her hands threading through his hair, her tail drawing him impossibly closer. Survive, she commanded, the word a promise and a plea. Survive, and I'll show you everything I've learned. Julian grinned, adrenaline thrumming. He slipped from the room, ducking into the maintenance corridor. The hatch to the ducts hissed open, and the chill air bit at his skin. He crawled forward, the echo of Nira's kiss burning on his lips. The duct was pitch dark, the only light the faint blue glow of his shield device. Every scrape of his clothing echoed like thunder. He reached the vent above the medical archives and peered through the slats. Below, a half-dozen armed loyalists paced between terrified hostages, among them a Felinaris child with Counselor Zira's emerald eyes. Across the chamber, the main doors boomed open. Nira strode in, flanked by Rin and a squad of guards. Her presence dominated the room, her hair a black and crimson halo, her tail a living whip. "Release them, and you will be treated fairly," she called, her voice ringing with power. "This is your only chance." The loyalists sneered. "We demand the renewal be cancelled. No one should feel this chaos. If we can't have order, no one can." As all eyes fixed on Nira, Julian dropped silently from the duct behind the hostages. He motioned for silence, then activated his shield. A shimmering wall of energy enveloped the hostages just as a loyalist spun, firing. The bolt fizzled harmlessly against the shield. Rin's squad surged forward. Naira darted in, a blur of motion, disabling two attackers with a sweep of her leg and a flash of claws. Julian scooped up the child, ushering the other hostages behind his protective field as the fight raged. Within moments, it was over. Loyalists disarmed and pinned, the hostages safe. Julian knelt, gently handing Zira's son back to his mother. Naira crossed the room in long strides, her eyes wide and glowing with relief and affection. She pressed her hand to Julian's face, her thumb stroking his cheek. "You did it," she breathed, awe and gratitude mingling in her voice. Counselor Zira bowed deeply. These feelings do not weaken us. They give us strength. Her words echoed through the room, taken up by others, counselors, guards, even the newly freed hostages. A dam broke, and the room filled with voices, some crying, some laughing, all alive. Naira stepped onto a dais, raising her hands for silence. The room stilled, every face turned to her, waiting. "The renewal is near," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Those who wish to keep the edits may do so, but it will be a choice, not a prison. I choose freedom. I choose love." The words rippled outward, reverberating in the hearts of all who heard them. The archives rang with laughter and tears, the ancient walls vibrating with emotion not felt in centuries. Julian gathered Naira into his arms, holding her close as the crowd celebrated. She nestled against him, tail curling around his waist. He pressed his lips to her forehead, voice gentle. "Still think making you laugh was worth it?" She gazed up at him, her eyes shimmering with feeling. "Worth everything," she whispered, and in her smile Julian saw the promise of a new empire, one built not on suppression, but on the courage to feel. On the eve of the renewal, Julian stood on Naira's balcony, the world unfolding before him in a riot of shifting lights. The night sky thrummed with incoming ships, their engines flickering against the darkness as dignitaries and delegates from 100 worlds arrived for the ceremony that would change the fate of an empire. The air was charged, alive with possibility and fear, as the city below braced for dawn. He barely noticed Eliza's approach until her reflection joined his in the glass. She held her holotablet tight, eyes scanning data that shifted with every breath. "3 admirals have pledged to the sovereign," she reported, her voice tense. But Tarek escaped. "He's broadcast Project Nightfall's data to every system. There's panic on the outer worlds. Some died when the edits were reversed. Genetic shock. Organ failure. Families are demanding answers." Julian's heart thudded with dread. He turned from the ships, racing through the palace's moonlit corridors until he found Naira in her study. She sat slumped at her desk, hair dimmed to a dull black, the red streaks nearly vanished. Her tail curled in tight distress around her chair. "The renewal is in hours," she said, not looking up as he entered. "Those who want the edits will get them. Those who don't might die. I never imagined the cost would be so high." Julian crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She shuddered, clinging to him as though he were the only real thing left in a world of shifting loyalties. "Let me help," he whispered, pressing his lips to her hair. Before she could answer, the alarms screamed, a piercing mechanical wail that reverberated through the citadel. The walls flashed with crimson warning lights, and Naira was already moving, fury burning in her golden eyes. They raced through the palace, Naira's stride long and unyielding. Rin met them at the entrance to the main corridor, her armor battered, weapon drawn. "Tarek's forces have breached the lower levels," she reported. "They're in the renewal chamber trying to destroy the genetic archives. If the records are lost, no one will be able to choose. Everyone will be trapped, one way or another." Julian's mind raced, mapping the palace in his thoughts. "The ducts?" he asked. "Are they still clear?" Rin nodded grimly. "But only someone your size could get through. We'll draw their attention at the main entrance." Nero whirled on Julian, grabbing his wrist. "I won't risk you," she hissed, her claws digging into his skin. "Not now. Not when we're this close." He smiled, lifting her hand to his lips. "But you'll risk everything else?" "Naira, let me prove love isn't weakness. Let me show you, what it really means to trust." For a heartbeat, her defenses faltered. Then, with a shuddering breath, she pressed her lips to his. Fast, desperate, as if she could imprint the memory before fate intervened. "If you die, I'll never forgive you," she whispered. "Then I won't," he promised, grinning as she pressed a glowing pendant into his palm. The warmth of it pulsed through his fingers, her royal signature encoded in crystal. "Return to me," she commanded. "That's an order." Julian darted away, Rin and her guards storming down the main corridor as he slipped into the maintenance hatch. The ducts were tight and freezing, his breath clouding the narrow tunnel. The pendant pulsed at his chest, guiding him like a heartbeat. He crawled on elbows and knees, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. He reached a vent overlooking the renewal chamber. Below, chaos reigned. Tarek stood at the central console, fingers flying over the controls, small charges already set at the bases of the genetic archives. Loyalists ringed him, weapons aimed at the doors. The sequencer's interface glowed a sickly green, its readings unstable. Suddenly, the chamber shook. Naira's voice, amplified and ringing, echoed from the corridor outside. "Tarek, surrender! The council is on its way. You cannot silence a galaxy." Tarek snarled, pressing the detonator. "She's too late. If I can't keep order, no one will." Julian kicked out the grate and dropped silently onto a walkway behind the archives. He sprinted for the sequencer, shield arcing to life as a loyalist spotted him and fired. Energy bolts ricocheted off the barrier, crackling in the charged air. He reached the console as the detonator flashed red. Without hesitation, Julian slammed the pendant into the access port. The system scanned the signature, 1,000 holographic glyphs swirling, before a chime sounded. The interface turned blue. Instantly, a wave of neutralizing energy swept the chamber, freezing the charges, locking them down. The archives flickered, then stabilized. The records were safe. Tarek whirled, stunned. Guards flooded in behind Rin and Nira, weapons trained. "How?" Tarek gasped, falling to his knees as the guards closed in. Julian faced him, breathless but steady. "Because she chose," he said. "She chose to feel, to trust, to love." Naira entered, her eyes bright with pride and relief. She crossed to Julian, her hand trembling as she brushed dust from his cheek. "Now we remember," she said, her voice ringing out. "Now we remember how to stand together, how to feel, how to laugh. You tried to make us forget, Tarek, but the future cannot be silenced." The archives glowed, a living memory of hope. Tomorrow, for the first time, the people would choose. Some would keep the edits, others would embrace emotion. The empire would become what its people decided, not what they were forced to accept. As the council took Tarek away and the chamber filled with the hum of restoration, Julian took Nira's hand. She squeezed it, her grip fierce and alive. He realized as they stood amid the glowing archives that love, once awakened, could never be silenced again. A month later, the Citadel was alive with celebration. Nova Helion's skies blazed with ceremonial flights. In the grand hall, Julian stood in formal attire, his collar stiff, his heart wild. Eliza bustled around him, giving a final check to his cuffs. "Most of the Empire has chosen freedom," she said, smiling with pride. "Even Tarek, in rehabilitation, is learning to feel." "You did it, Julian." He smiled, nerves and joy tangling in his chest. Rin appeared at his side, resplendent in ceremonial armor. "They're waiting," she said, and led him through the shining corridors. Thousands watched as Julian stepped into the hall, awash in color and light. Then Naira entered, every eye drawn to her. Her hair and tail shimmered, a living tapestry of color and emotion. She walked with regal certainty, her gaze locked to his, love radiating in every movement. They met at the dais, hands entwined. The vows were simple, spoken from the heart, promises to love, to laugh, to stand together until the stars themselves faded. When they kissed, the grand hall erupted. Cheers and tears, laughter and song. The sound echoed into the night, carrying hope to every corner of the empire. Later, as they danced beneath the citadel's crystalline arches, Naira pressed close, her voice a private melody in Julian's ear. "Ready for the future?" she asked, her fingers curled into his. He smiled, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "Nothing worth having is easy, but we'll face it together, one laugh at a time." Above them, the moon set on a new empire, one built on the strength of both reason and love. Nira pressed her forehead to his, her breath mingling with his. "I love you," she whispered. Julian looked into her shining eyes and grinned. "I can see it in your eyes." She laughed, a bright, beautiful sound that carried through the hall, a sound that changed a civilization. She kissed him again, promising a lifetime of discovery and joy, and in that moment, the future felt as boundless as the stars. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.